What's going on, guys? Scar coming at you with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we're going to be diving into some decks that are going to be coming to Magic the Gathering Arena. If you're a new player or a player who's just recently started Magic the Gathering Arena, you had to go through the whole new player trial pretty much and play through a bunch of Magic the Gathering games to kind of unlock the starter decks and eventually unlock multicolored decks. So I actually ran across a post on Reddit as I was kind of searching because I heard that there was some news, and I was searching for the other video where I was talking about the news, the new deck, the new packs that they're coming out with for Zendikar Rising, and I was just curious if they announced anything else that may have not been picked up by the news. And I didn't think this would be something that maybe like news outlets or gaming outlets would pick up on for MTG as a whole, just because it's something that really only affects like MTG Arena exclusively, and something like brand new. Like the cards that you're going to be seeing in the decks that I'm going to be doing in this video aren't anything that you haven't seen before. Maybe they're cards that you can't technically get from the packs themselves, but overall these cards are cards that are already in the game. But Magic the Gathering is just doing a quick update to the new player experience by upgrading the decks to something that is standard current. So the one thing I would suggest, if you guys want to go ahead and create these decks, you're free to do so. But if you want to wait, I'm not sure 100% when these decks will be released into Arena, but these decks are going to be eventually available to everybody, as just having been playing MTG Arena as a new starter way experience. So with that being said, guys, if you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to post more videos, hit that subscribe button. But let's dive into these decks and kind of see what they're doing. All right, so the one thing I will say here is, if you kind of see here, there's a couple decks I actually don't have the cards for, but every other starter deck I do have all the cards for. Overall, there are 10 new multicolor starters. I also saw in this Reddit post that there is also going to be 5 basic standard color decks, like the 5 key colors, but it's monocolor. So there's also gonna be a total of 15 new starter decks into MTG Arena for the new player experience, and they kind of range from different color combinations of monocolor to dual colors. There's no tricolor decks, it looks like. So in this video, we're gonna go across the first 5, and then I'll probably make a part 2 and we'll go across the other 5. I'll leave all the links for these decks in the description down below, so if you guys want to check the decks out themselves, kind of pull them into Arena, kind of just see what you may already own from these decks, kind of see what else is coming together to kind of maybe give yourself a better understanding of what there is to come to MTG Arena. Also, the other thing too, I noticed that from the Reddit post, I'll also leave a link for that in the description below if you want to look at it yourself. The Wizards of the Coast employee did actually comment on this Reddit post, saying that some of these lists aren't finalized. I'm sure they're probably tweaking just numbers maybe, or overall consistency of these decks, because I mean the one thing with starter decks, you always want to give a player a new, like, that's new to the game, or someone who's just starting out, kind of decent decent experience when it comes to jumping into Magic the Gathering maybe for the first time, or just online in MTG Arena for the first time. So that's the other thing too. But enough said, guys. I'm going to hop into the first deck, which is going to be the new Simic starter, and we're going to just kind of go down the list across the top, and then the ones I'm kind of blocking currently are going to be the ones we're going to be doing in the next video. So the one thing too to note before we go into this, if you guys are new to Magic the Gathering Arena and you maybe don't know what the rotation is, but every September they do a rotation where certain sets of Magic the Gathering kind of rotate out to kind of refresh the meta for standard. So we will be losing stuff from MTG Arena, in a sense that it'll be standard legal in September. I think it's the 17th of September or the 24th. I think one of the dates is like the pre-release for like the physical MTG game in like the world, and then like the other ones for Arena. But overall, what we're going to be losing is we're going to be losing everything from Guilds of Ravnica to Core 2020. So we'll be losing all these sets. So all these cards are actually going to be completely out of the standard block of cards you can work with to build standard decks with. So just know, if you are creating decks currently, you probably want to not go heavy and focus on crafting these cards. Sure, you can still use them in MTG Arena, it's just that you'll only be able to play in historic mode. So if you're looking to get into standard, these are cards you're probably going to want to avoid for, or try to find replacements currently. But anything from Thulnaville Drain to M21 you're going to be good to go for. And when Zendikar Rising comes out, there'll be another set that you can work with to kind of make decks out of. So enough being said about that, just kind of give you an idea of what rotation is and kind of what to expect. These decks are going to include anything from Thulnaville Drain all the way up to Core 2021. So everything here you'll see in these decks, you may see a mixture of a little bit more from one set than the other, but these decks will have a combination of a little bit of everything to kind of just give you that little bit of flavor that each of these sets bring. The one thing I will notice from what I saw is a lot of these decks do kind of go into like certain types of archetypes that are brought into these sets. So like for example, if you're playing like Rakdos, like the Rakdos deck that's a starter deck is kind of like a sacrifice deck. So with that being said, enough talking about, let's just dive into the Simic deck. Let's get through this. I don't want to make the video too long, and I also be breaking this video into separate parts, so if you want to kind of skip ahead into like a certain color scheme that you're more familiar with, definitely do that as well. So to start off, we are in the new Simic starter. Overall, the deck is pretty interesting. It does run a lot of 2s and 3s and, 1s of. They are only giving you 1 rare, so that's the one thing that is, as being a starter deck, they typically don't give you a set of cards, especially rares, to kind of get yourself started. So if you want to upgrade the deck, the first thing you probably want to do is upgrade, particular cards that are working well, that are very good, which would be the rares, maybe some of the uncommons, and then kind of go from there and kind of figure out where you want to go. But overall, the deck is pretty interesting on what it's trying to do. This deck is a Simic, kind of like bulky, kind of back end, so a lot of the cards are trying to ramp you up to get to that bulky, big creatures to finish out the game. So it's like a Simic ramp deck in a way, but not the typical Simic ramp that you see like in the meta currently. It's like a little bit different just because some of those cards are going to be rotating out. This is trying to do something a little bit different in that essence. So to first start off, we got the Witching Well. It's a thing that just, it costs 1 mana. It's an artifact, allows you to scry, and you can tap 4 and you can draw 2 cards. So it's pretty good in that sense. Decent, good card to kind of give you some interaction of a come into battle effect, as well as giving it a later game where you can tap 4 mana and sacrifice it to draw some mana. You get the Almighty Brushwag. The one thing I also say is that a lot of decks that have green have this card in it. I don't know why. Maybe they just think he's the cutest little brushwag ever, but he's in this deck. He's got 2 copies of him. He's got trample. He's a tap ability that you can tap 4 and give him +3/+3, so he can become a 4/4 with trample. Then you got ram through. It's a a way for green to do some damage to some creatures. If you have some bigger higher end creatures, you can have them deal damage to a creature to remove them from the battlefield. If the creature has trample, then does the excess damage over that to that the person who controls that creature. So definitely a good spot removal card for green, especially if we're going big. Willful Heaven will allow us to increase the mana production that we have of our lands. It makes our lands to be able to tap for additional green, and as well as in the late game, if we really don't need that additional mana, we can always sacrifice this enchantment by tapping 5 and get a 2/2 wolf token. So that's also pretty interesting. We got a Marrowleaf Pixie, which is a 2-cost 2/2 with flying. It can tap down for green or blue, but it's also good that it's a 2/2 flyer for 2, so that's actually not that bad. And just creates that little bit of tap down for some additional mana. Then we got Cultivate. It's another card from M21. It's not rare. I just participated in that timeless event that they did in MTG Arena, so I got the alternate art version. But this is actually, if we go to this and we just take off the Cultivate, it's an uncommon. So if you want, you can always get the normal version of the deck, the normal version of Cultivate, and maybe build up that. It's just another card that allows us to search our library for 2 basic land cards. We have to put 1 into our battlefield tap, the other one to our hand, and we have to shuffle our library. So definitely a good card to help you ramp up. Then we got Fully Grown, which is like a giant growth kind of effect, and as well it puts a trample counter on a creature that we control, so it gives a +3/+3 and trample, and then that creature pretty much has trample because it now has a trample counter. So it's a way to get that additional damage in, maybe to set up maybe a ram through later in the game, but definitely a good way to pump up a creature and give it trample. Then War Visionary, another card that ramps, as well as it does draw us a card, so we play it, we get a card out of it, and then maybe down the line we get to use it to pump, to tap down to hopefully play one of our bigger creatures. Thunder Snapper is a 4 mana 4/4, and then when we cast a spell with a converted mana cost 5 or greater, we get to draw a card. So just a good way to kind of draw a little bit deeper into our deck. Just as we get to, as you kind of see here, when we get to the 5 and higher drops, we do play quite a few of them. Our goal is to kind of get to this point and actually, play these things, and then you can kind of get some card advantage back for playing things. Elder Gargaroth is another card. It's a 5 cost from M21. It is a mythic. This is the mythic of the deck. Has Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and whenever attacks are blocks, you get a 3/3 beast, you get to gain 3 life, or you get to draw a card. So definitely a cool utility card. You can attack in with Vigilance, draw a card. You can get some life if you're playing against something a little bit more aggressive, or you can get us creative with 3/3 and try to go wide on your opponent. Definitely a good card overall, and especially in the starter deck, it's definitely a good starter card because it has a lot of powerful abilities that you get right off the bat. Next card up is Keeper of the Fables, another 5 cost 4/5, and whenever one or more non-human creatures deal combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So just another way for our creatures, if we hit our opponent in the face, we get some draw effects out of it. They draw a little bit deeper into our deck to hopefully finish out the game. This deck can probably go off in a way that you could probably swing with 3, 4, 5 creatures, maybe some of them have trample, and then you're getting all this damage to your opponent, and you get to draw all these cards. So definitely cool. Serpent of Yawn in Depths, 6/6 Serpent. Kraken, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents you control can't be blocked by except by Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. I think this is a card that is exclusively from Theros starters that you get from a code, so you actually have to craft it if you want an MTG Arena. But this is a card coming in with the new starter decks, and it allows you to have a 6/6 that's pretty much unblockable. And we do play a whale, so I think that also counts. I think they count a whale as a Leviathan. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely a cool card with a little bit unblockable. It's kind of like another way to kind of get some free damage in it, unless they're playing the same exact deck. Sublime Empathy is another cool utility, like choose multiple things, counter spell, because it counters target spell, it counters target activator triggered ability, so you can actually counter, coming into play abilities, counter planeswalkers, like their triggers. You can also return target non-land permanent to its owner's hands, create a token of target creature you control, so you can get another Gargaroth. You can also draw a card. So this card is literally choose one or more, so you can do a whole bunch of things when you play it. So you can counter something, and then on top of it, do a couple other things to maybe slow down your opponent completely. Another card from N21, pretty cool to see that in here. Then we have Kolga, a 6-cost 7/6, and when it enters the battlefield, it gets to fight a target creature we don't control. And then whenever it attacks, you get to destroy target artifact or enchantment defendant player controls. And then we can tap 2, return target human we control to our hand, and he gets indestructible down a turn. So I don't know how many humans we play, but definitely cool. Like, he fights a creature, so it's another removal. He gets to destroy any artifacts or enchantments when he attacks. 7/6, pretty decent body, definitely a good way to get in for some damage. Okay, maybe the whale is not unblockable, but the whale is interesting too, because whenever the whale enters the battlefield, each opponent creates a 1/1 red pirate creature token. This creature can't block, and creatures you control attack each turn of Fable. So what this does, if our opponent has creatures and they're kind of sitting back, but they're not really attacking in, we can actually, this card here forces our opponent to now attack in, which is definitely interesting because a lot of our creatures are very large, so our opponent will have to attack into these larger creatures, and allows us to kind of set up blocks the way we want to. The other thing too is our opponent, if they want to get rid of this, they would have to pay an additional 3 mana more to actually cast a spell that they're trying to remove this with directly. A board wipe still will remove this card, but they'll have to probably drop something that's going to wipe the whole board, and not just like something that removes creature cards with a converted mana cost X or less or something like that. Beanstalk Giant, another good card, and a little bit of ramp. It's a 3 mana ramp that allows us to search our library for a land card, basic land card, puts it on the battlefield, not tapped, actually on the battlefield, and then we get to shuffle our library, and then we can bring it in later in the game for a 7 mana creature with the power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control. So hopefully by this point we at turn 7, maybe we have 7 mana. It's a 7/7 automatically. Thorn Mammoth, another interesting creature too. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, this fights one creature we don't control, so it has a trigger ability every time we play a creature, it fights something. So it's a good way to other spot removal. And the mana base is pretty straightforward. It's 25 lands, 10 islands, 11 forests. Actually, it's 26 lands. Most of these decks have anywhere between 24 and 26. So 10 lands, 11 forests, 1 temple, and 4 Thorn Falls. Overall, this is a pretty interesting deck. It seems pretty fun. I mean, definitely there's ways and avenues to upgrade it. I just haven't been able to play with it, kind of see where I want to upgrade. You don't want to go super aggressive into the end game, but I would probably look at ways to, kind of help the ramp of the deck, go a little bit faster. So maybe try to cut down on the early game and just try to focus on playing end game creatures and stuff like that. But overall, cool deck. Next up we have is a Dimir deck. It's kind of interesting here. This one is actually like a Dimir mutate / control-y kind of deck, in the way that it has things with flash, it has things with mutate, it has things to kind of slow down your opponent, and it kind of has some interesting ways to finish out the game. So overall, this deck is pretty straightforward. It plays a lot of things with mutate if you kind of just don't notice things off the bat right in the list, but there's a few things in here that actually have benefits when we mutate, and there's things that we can play in at instant speed. So to start off, we got Stern Dismissal, which is an instant speed spell that allows us to return target creature or enchantment opponent controls to their hand, so we can kind of bounce something as a flash speed. Later down the line, if you have them lying around or you already have them in your collection, you can always play Brazen Borrower right off the bat. Is something that really comes to mind as something that you probably want to maybe throw in here, just as a multi-tool like card that has 2 different effects. Then we got the Mysterious Egg, or the Mothra's Great Cocoon. I just had the alternate art because I bought the packs back when the set release, but whenever it mutates, you get a +1/+1 counter. So this is a decent 0/2, slows down maybe something a little bit aggressive that plays like 1/1s that try to swing in. It can get bigger the more we mutate it. Probably like Symbiote, it's another card from Ikoria, it pretty much whenever we mutate, it makes our mutates cheaper, and whenever we mutate, we get to draw a card and discard a card, so it gives us a way to dig a little bit deeper. Then we have Boot Nipper, enters the battlefield with a choice of Death Touch or Lifelink counter on it, so definitely cool. You know, you can make a 2/1 blocker with Death Touch or 2/1 Lifelinker. Maybe our opponent's now going to think again if they want to give us life, if they're going to swing in for damage. Heartless Act for some spot removal. Unexpected Fangs for a +1/+1 counter and lifelink on target creature, so cool way to kind of like just pump a creature for a little bit and give it a little bit of lifelink, maybe for that additional +1/+1, and also, you know, additional life for whatever the power of the creature. Sea Dasher Octopus, a one of in here, has flash mutate, so we can play this at instant speed, so we can swing in. If our opponent doesn't block, we can mutate it on that creature, and now that creature has, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Definitely a cool card, definitely something I would play more of if I have them already in my inventory. And with that, with the Polyak Symbiote, this is actually mutate for 1. If you want to play for the mutate cost instead of the actual card cost. If you play for the card cost, I think this one costs, you know, still 3. You got Tomb Raider, another flyer, and just battlefield to draw a card, just a 3 cost. Probably something I would probably cut back on. Maybe add more Sea Dasher Octopuses. So you cut back on 2 of these, add another, you know, 2 more Sea Dasher Octopuses replace. I think these equal out. I mean, granted, this has fly-in, it is a fairy, but I think this overall ability is much better than the one-time draw a card on entering the battlefield. Then you got the Dirge Bat, another card from Ikoria, flash fly-in, mutate for 6. Whenever this creature mutates, just destroy target creature or planeswalker opponent controls. So even if you've already mutated this onto something, you can then mutate it again, and it'll trigger this ability again and whatever other mutates on. If you haven't played mutate before, it's kind of interesting on what it's trying to accomplish with that. Also, it's a 3/3 flyer at flash speed, so you can play this instantly and, you know, create a flyer blocker for opponent thinks they can get maybe for a couple points of damage in the air. Unstable Hamophage, a 4-cost 3/3 with Death Touch, mutate a 3, and whenever this creature mutates, each opponent loses X life. You gain X life for X number of times this creature is mutated. So the more times this creature mutates, you know, you get the idea. The more and more damage it does. If you haven't played mutate decks, it's like usually a lot of things have stacking mutate abilities on how that works. You got Etris, Oracle of the Half Truth. This is another interesting card. It's a one of. It has Menace, but when it enters the battlefield, our opponent gets 3 cards, and they have to decide put two of them face up or face down, and put one of them the other way, and then pretty much we get to puts a one face up pile, one face down pile, gets to choose out of the 3 cards how many go face up and how many go face down, and it's kind of like a gamble. Our opponent can give us 2 lands and put something good face down, or vice versa. It can be like kind of like a pick up what box is better. Definitely interesting ability. It's a good way to kind of get some extra cards. Usually sometimes I take the 2 cards just because having 2 additional cards in your hand for a cost of 1 card is actually sometimes good. Sometimes we even need the lands unless it's late game. Maybe we take the 1 card, we take a risk and see what happens. We get the Dreamtail Heron, another another mutate card with flying, and whenever this creature mutates, we get to draw a card. So having a card that whenever it mutates draws an additional card is always good. As we have a lot of mutates, this is definitely something that could probably trigger multiple times. Pouncing Shore Shark, a good way to bounce our opponent's creatures back to their hand for a flash speed. That's a 4/3, so definitely something that's possible. And it only costs 4 to mutate at flash speed, so it's like a 4-cost 4/3 mutate at flash, and then bounce it back to their hand. And if we have Polywag Symbiote to counteract this, we're also drawing a card out of it. And then if it's mutating on something that has another ability, you know, you're stacking these mutate abilities, and as you can kind of see, these things are kind of building up to something bigger and bigger. Then we got the Underworld Sentinel. This is a card that I guess is from Theros. I had to take a second. I guess you only got it in starters or something like that, or from code. And whenever it attacks, exile target card from our graveyard. Whenever it dies, put all exile cards onto the battlefield. So our opponent kind of wants to block this, but they don't want to kill it. And if they do kill it, we get all the cards that were underneath it are in exile from this onto the battlefield. So definitely an interesting card. I haven't played with it. I don't have any copies of it just because, like I said, I think it's an exclusive card that's from a code or from physical MTG that I have not gotten. And then Children Harvester, another interesting card here. It's a 5-cost mutate or 6-cost creature. Whenever this creature mutates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Because we have a ton of things with mutate, this thing could probably trigger multiple times, making our opponent sacrifice multiple creatures. Even if we have this on the battlefield, we can put cheap mutates onto it, in which this will then trigger multiple times that way. Lockmere Serpent, another interesting card here. It's a flash 7/7 for 6 mana. We can sacrifice an island. It can't be blocked this turn. We can sacrifice a swamp. We get to draw. We get to gain 1 life. We get to draw a card, and we can also tap 2. We can exile 5 cards from opponent's graveyard, return it from our graveyard to our hand, activate this ability anytime we control a sorcery. So if our opponent does kill it off, we can always get it back from our graveyard for 2 mana by exiling 5 of their cards. Definitely interesting, but we have to do it on our turn because it's only sorcery speed. And Archipelago is another card here that kind of finishes off the game, because what it does is a 6 cost mutate or 7 cost creature, 7/7. Whenever this creature mutates, you tap X target creature X the number of times that this creature is mutated, and those creatures can't untap during their controller's untap step. So if they don't have any creatures, we can tap them down, swing it for the finishing game. And it's another card that just has mutate. Then you got Demon of Loathing. It's a 7 cost 7/7 flying trampler. Whenever Demon of Loathing deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a creature. So just another card that makes our opponent sacrifice. It's 7 cost 7/7. Another, I think, exclusive card to have in Theros buying the starters or something. Definitely interesting card, maybe decent, but overall it's a decent card. And then 10 islands, 11 swamps, 4 dismal backwaters, and 1 temple of the seed, so another 26 mana deck. So overall, pretty cool deck, to another cool starter deck to play with. So the next deck up is going to be a Golgari deck. It's pretty interesting here because the deck is a mixture of mill stuff to your graveyard, sacrifice your things, and what you're trying to do here is kind of fill your graveyard up, trying to get these things back later in the game. And then things also that help, but that benefit from you putting things in your graveyard that have like escape and things like that. So overall, this deck is pretty interesting. I did actually play around with this. It's kind of interesting just because the matchups I got were a little weird, just based on it. I don't think the MTG client really knows where to fit this deck when it comes to actually physically playing the deck. But overall, this deck is pretty cool. It's pretty fun. It has some cool little tricks and stuff. And I was actually holding my own against a pretty decent Sultai control deck that I think our opponent just didn't know what to do with it, just because I was playing weird things that they probably have never seen before. So that is something. So to start off, this deck is starting off with 2 village rites. It's a pretty new cool spell from M21 that allows us to sacrifice a creature to play the additional cost, and we get to draw 2 cards. So sacrifice one of our creatures, we can sacrifice a token, we get to draw 2 cards. Mire Triton, a 2/1 death touch. When it enters the battlefield, we mill 2 cards, we gain 2 life. So cool way to gain some life. Put a 2/1 death toucher on the battlefield, which our opponent may not want to attack into, because it can kill pretty much anything it deals damage to. So definitely another cool card. Order of Midnight, a card to get something back from our graveyard to our hand, and then we can tap 2 and play a 2/2 flyer that can't block. That's the only downfall to it, but it's pretty cool that we can kind of get something back from our graveyard for only 2 mana, creature wise, not anything, just creature wise. Then we got Gift of Strength, another 2 cost 3/3, gives our creature +3/+3 in reach. It's a decent card. I think there was something in one of the Simic decks, I can't remember the name of the card, but I think giving something a trample counter is probably better if it's the same mana cost. But another cool card that's in this deck to give something a little bit of, you know, swat something out of the air in case they're trying to fly over you, in case they play something like Azorius Flyers or something like that. Skull Prophet, 2 cost 3/1. It's a mana producer, or we can tap it and we can also mill cards. So if we're trying to fill up our graveyard to maybe escape something later, it's definitely a cool card like that. I think Fiend Artisan would be an interesting card in this deck just because it benefits from us putting creatures in the graveyard. So there's quite a few creatures in here that we could definitely benefit from actually, you know, putting creatures in our deck. Deathbloom Thaliad, it's a 3 cost 3/2. When it dies, it creates a 1/1 green sapling token. So just a cool card that kind of, you know, if it dies, we get something at least in return. If it falls off the battlefield, if they board wipe, we at least have some 1/1s that we can do something with. You know, put a Village Rites on one of the 1/1s in case, you know, our opponent has something bigger. Dig a little bit deeper. Overall, interesting card. Demonic Embrace, another card from M21. If you've been playing anything in the meta, something that mono black runs to kind of try to fly like a dinosaur right at you to do like 10 damage in the air. It gives that creature +3/+1 in flying. It's a demon to its other types, and we can cast Demonic Embrace from our graveyard by paying 3 life and discarding a card additional, paying its other cost. So definitely a cool way to get this thing back in case our creature dies that has on it. Murderous Rider, another spot removal card here, has a Swift End, which is a destroy target creature or planeswalker. We lose 2 life, and then we can play for its 3 costs. Lifelinker, when it dies, we get to put it on the bottom of our library. So it never really dies. It's always going to go back into our library as long as it dies. Llanowar Visionary, another card that draws some cards, adds some mana, 3 costs. Help us ramp up a little bit to some of our later top end of the deck. Drag to Underworld, we played a decent amount of black and green, so this is actually something that we probably will get it to 2 mana to destroy target creature for 2. Instant speed from Ikoria. Theros. Nightmare Shepherd, also another fun card. it's a 4/4 flyer that costs 4. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we may exile it. If we do, we get to put a copy of that creature onto the battlefield. That's a 1/1, and that's a nightmare into its other types. So if there's something we don't really want to lose and we just kind of want to make triggers happen again, we can always play a Nightmare Shepherd and make a copy of something. Then we got Arista, the Endless Web. It's a 4-cost 3/5. It has reach. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we get a 1/2 green spider token with reach. It's definitely a big body, something that our opponent can't really burn down directly. They'll have to kind of like use multiple spells to get rid of it, and the fact that whenever they play spells, if they're trying to get rid of it with spells, we'll get a creature out of it in that process. Then you got Alkalite Affliction. It's a 4-cost 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, we get to mill 2 cards. Then we get to return target a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand, so it kind of fills our graveyard up, and we get something back in return. So if there's something we want to recur, like a spell, or not a spell, but like a creature, we can always get it back and then have it in our hand and play it from our hand. Some of the escape cards are actually cheaper. They're cheaper when we play it from our hand. We don't have to burn all the cards in our graveyard to replay it. Born-Narrow Lurker, another card that mutates, and we get to return target card from our graveyard to our hand. So we can get this one we get back a spell. It costs 4 to get a 4/4 mutate guy. Definitely a cool card. It's a 4/4 for 4, but the mutate ability to get a particular card back from our graveyard is pretty cool. Then you got Polukranos. This is an interesting card here because it's a 4 mana 6/6. If it escapes, it has 12/12. If it dealt damage, it has a +1/+1 counter on it, prevent that damage, remove that many +1/+1 counters. We can tap 3. We can also fight creatures, so it's another spot removal card in that way that we can fight something to just kill it and then kind of get through for some damage. It does get weaker every time it gets dealt damage, so it will always be a 6/6 or a 12/12. But definitely cool that later in the game, if it does die and we have to bring it back, we get a 12/12 out of it. Next card up after that is a Twin Blade Assassin. This card's pretty interesting too. It's a card from M21. At the beginning of our end step, if a creature died this turn, we get to draw a card. So even if our opponent's creatures died, we get to draw a card. It's a 5/4 for 5 mana. Definitely cool little concept. With the spot removal and things having death touch, we definitely can kill a few of our opponent's things and definitely get some card draw out of it. So definitely cool in that way. Back for more, it's a 6-cost instant. We have to turn target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. When you do, it fights up to 1 creature we don't control. So we can always get back a Polukranos. We can always get back, Twin Blade or anything like that, or even something with Death Touch, and it will fight something. And it can always kill it. Then you get the Tree Shaker Chimera. It's a 7-cost 8/5. All creatures able to block it do so. Whenever it dies, we get to draw 3 cards. So this is something we can also get back for more. Just on the basis of regardless if this dies from that back for more, we get 3 cards out of it. Maybe we'll draw another back for more. But overall, cool card. It's another card I think from the starters that I guess I crafted for something. I don't know why, but I already had a copy of it, so I just went with it. And the mana base here is also 25 lands, 10 swamps, 10 forests, 4 jungle hollows, and 1 temple of Miladies. So overall, I mean, the decks are looking like they have X amount of rares in it. It looks like anywhere from 5 to like 6, and occasionally there's a mythic in there. I guess if it fits like the overall story that they're trying to do for these decks. And the next deck up in this new starter list here is a new Selesnya starter deck that actually focuses on adventure. If you haven't seen already, it actually kind of looks similar to the list I kind of ran in the draft that I actually just recently posted over the weekend. Overall, what the goal here is it plays Selesnya cards. A lot of things have adventure on them, so there's things to get additional triggers of getting cards that draw, making things bigger when you play things with adventure creatures. So really, the deck is pretty straightforward in what it's trying to do here. So the first card up is the Fairy Guide Mother. It's a 1-cost 1/1 flyer. Does have the ability to tap 2. We can give target creature +2/+1. It gains flying to turn just for that additional damage. So definitely a cool card there. It's sorcery speed, so we do have to play it during our first main if we're going to swing in with it. We can't really play it in response to something, but cool in that sense. We got Giant Killer, destroys target creature with power 4 or greater for 3 mana, or we can play it as its 1-cost 1/2 ability, with the ability to tap 2 mana and tap it to tap target creatures. So definitely a good way to slow down our opponent's big things that we can't really, take damage from. Edgewall Innkeeper, whenever we cast a creature spell that has adventure, draw a card. It doesn't need to have gone on its adventure first. So that's the one thing. So it doesn't have to play its first half in order to play the second half. You can just play the card if you want to play the card to get the card drawn out of it. Shepherd Flock, a card that allows us to return target permanent we control to our hand. So if we want to, get like something like a Fairy Guide Mother back to our hand to maybe just replay its ability again, it's a cool card to do something like that. You can kind of combo with things like that. Maybe you want to replay a Lovestruck Beast because they got rid of our 1/1s. You don't have a level 1 for it, so you can tap 1, play the 1/1. Replay the Lovestruck Beast token, so on and so forth. Silver Flame Squire, it's a 2-cost 2/1. It has the ability to tap 3 mana and target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Untap it, so it's a good way to kind of you know, swing in with a card and then kind of like, you know, deal damage to your opponent or creature, and then untap it and, you know, allow it to be as a blocker on the return. Garen Break Squire. This is a card that actually gets bigger every time we play creature with an adventure. It gets +1/+1. It doesn't need to have gone on the adventure first. It's the one tooltip here that, in case you don't know, you can play the cards regardless, but this is something that does get bigger. It's definitely something that can get in for some damage if they're not, you know, they don't really protect from it. Bronze Head Lions, another cool card here. It's 3/3 for 2 mana. Tap 2 mana. It can send Indestructible into a turn. When it dies, we get to return to the battlefield. It's an or enchantment with the, you know, enchant creature you control has the ability to gain Indestructible in that turn, and it loses all other abilities. But it's cool in the sense that it does, you know, give the creature Indestructible, so we can swing in, give it Indestructible, and hopefully get in for some damage. Lucky Clover makes our adventures, the adventure side of the cards all trigger multiple times. So a card that we play 2 of allows, you know, things like pumping creatures and things like that happen twice. So maybe getting a little bit more aggressive and doing a little bit more damage. Ardenvale Tactician, we get to tap target 2 creatures. And then it's a 2/3 flyer for 3, so definitely a cool way to get over, but a way to tap down our opponent's things if we don't want them to swing in before their attack step. Banish Sunlight for some spot removal, definitely a good way to get rid of something really big that you can't really handle, you don't have an answer for. And then this allows us to kind of like, you know, slow the game down a little bit more into our pace. Mysterious Pathlighter, that's a 3-cost 2/2 flyer. Each creature we control that has an adventure enters the battlefield additional +1/+1 counters, which is good, which makes our, you know, adventure cards get that little bit bigger, so allows us to, you know, maybe not have them die instantly. Lovestruck Beast, it's a 1/of, it creates a 1/1 token on its adventure side, and it's a 3-cost 5/5, but it can't attack unless we have something that has a 1/1. Definitely a very strong card. Combine that with the Mysterious Pathlighter, that Lovestruck Beast now comes in as a 6/6, something our opponent really has to take care of. Wandermare, a 3-cost 3/3, and then where we cast a creature spell that has adventure, put a +1/+1 counter on it, so that stays. So this Wandermare can actually get very big very quickly. As you can tell, a lot of our cards have adventure, so definitely a way for our cards to just get ridiculously big that have, you know, adventure triggers. Then we got the Oak Ham Ranger. It's a 4-cost 2/2. We can tap 4 mana, get 2 1/1 soldier tokens on battlefield. We can tap when we play for its creature things. We can tap it down. Creatures we control get +1/+1, so it gives our, you know, our attack in that additional damage. Victory Envoy, at the beginning of our upkeep, we get the +1/+1 counter each creature we control, which is good, but in the sense that it's not always good because the 1/1s then get +1/+1 counters, and our, you know, our Lovestruck Beast can attack. But a card that is also part of like that list of cards that you can't get physically impacts MTG Arena that you'd have to buy physical magic for. Iron Scale Hydra, it's a 5-cost 5/5. If the creature would deal damage to Iron Scale Hydra, prevent that damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So a cool way that pretty much prevents combat damage to it. And it just gets bigger for equal to prevent the damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's just a way that gets a 5/5 that gets bigger. Just a, you know, bigger board, or bigger body. And then you get the Rimcloak Giants, a 7-cost 7/7 of Vigilance, but it has the 5-cost destroy all non-giant creatures, so a good way to wipe the board if our opponents overwhelm us. I know it may wipe some of our things, but a good way to, you know, just slow down the board, reset, and then maybe get this back in later in the game. Deck overall is pretty straightforward in mana. 10 Plains, 10 Forests, 4 Blossom and Sands, and 1 Temple of Plenty. Overall, this deck is pretty fun in a limited sense, in like a new player sense. It was pretty fun in the draft. I did fairly well against other decks that were similar. Not really sure how this stacks up against the meta. But that is the Selesnya deck. And the last deck up is a Rakdos deck here for this video. This one is a sacrifice deck overall. It's an interesting deck just because it's not the typical sacrifice deck that you've seen that's Rakdos. It doesn't play any cats. It's not playing any priests because those are rotated out. So this is doing like sacrifice in like a different way, and like a more like way that's, I guess, new player friendly. It has a couple interesting cards in here that definitely do a couple things. First card up is that Lash of Thorns. It's a 1-cost instant. You have target creature +2/+1 against Death Touch. So something that, you know, attack blocks. We can always throw something in front of it, give it +2/+1 and some Death Touch so that it dies in the process. Serrated Scorpion, 1/2, a good way to, you know, do 2 damage to an opponent if it dies, and then we gain 2 life in that. Infuriate, just get that little bit extra damage in if we want to make sure we save something, or we just want to get that little 3 points of extra damage to our opponent's face. Discordant Piper, it's a 2-cost 2/1. Whenever it dies, we get a 0/1 goat. It's a good sacrifice fodder, so us getting the goat is definitely good in that we get something when something dies. Heartless Act for some spot removal. Blood Aspirant from is another good card. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, we get a +1/+1 counter on him. We can tap 2, tap him, sacrifice creature or enchantment. It deals 1 damage to target creature, and that creature can't block. So it's a good way to maybe spot removal something that's a 1/1 or a token, and then we get +1/+1 because it sacrificed something, so it gets even bigger. Careless Celebrant deals 2 damage. Whenever it dies, it deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker that an opponent controls. So another card that if it blocks something, it can throw the 2 damage somewhere else. Definitely a cool card. Fire Prophecy is another burn spell that we have in the deck. It's 3 cost, 3 damage, target creature. We may put a card from our hand on the bottom of our library, and then we get to draw a card to replace it. So definitely cool in that way. Forbidden Friendship is another cool card. It creates 2/1/1 tokens that we can either swing into our opponent's face, or we can sacrifice for any of the cards that have sacrifice abilities. But we get a 1/1 red dinosaur and a 1/1 white token. The dinosaur has haste, so that's definitely cool in that sense. Thrill of Possibility is a way to remove some discard a card. We have 2 new cards at instant speed. Definitely cool. Croxa to help our opponent discard cards, so that our opponent has to make tough choices. And then if they don't discard a non-land card, they lose 3 life. And then we get to tap 4 and exile 5 cards. We get to bring him back as a 6/6, and it's only 2 mana to play, so definitely cool. Slaughter Priest of Mogus, another card here that whenever we sacrifice a permanent, gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Has an ability to tap just 2 mana of any color. We can sacrifice another creature or enchantment. It gets first strike until end of turn. So if we sacrifice something from him, he's gonna get +2/+0, and first strike if we pay the 2, and then combine that with our Blood Aspirant, that's going to get bigger. So there's things to get bigger as we sacrifice things. Stormfist Crusader, it's a way to dig a little bit deeper. Our opponent does draw a card out of this, but it's a way that we dig a little bit deeper. Our opponent maybe not be able to take that 1 point of damage if we get very aggressive on them. It's definitely cool in that sense. Liliana's Standard Bearer, it's a cool card that with flash, and we can flash it in if we sacrifice multiple creatures. We can draw X cards or X number of creatures that had died under our control this turn. So if we sacrifice a couple tokens to some things, play this, we can definitely draw some cards to replace some of the things we may have lost. Rose Shredder, a card that you may have seen in Rakdos decks. It creates a goat token. We can tap it, or we can activate it, and we can sacrifice a creature. We can scry one, so if they're trying to spot remove something else, we'll sack a response. We'll get a scry out of it. And we tap 5, we get Escape It from our graveyard. It gets 2 additional +1/+1 counters, so it comes back as a 5/4. Dire Fleet Warmonger, another card here at the beginning of our combat when we sacrifice another creature. If we do, it gets +2/+2 and trample. Combine that with everything else that has sacrifice triggers, so definitely a good way to get some additional damage. Eat to Extinction, exile target creature or planeswalker, like the top card of our library, we put that card into our graveyard. So we get to kind of remove something or exile something, and then we get to throw something in our graveyard if we don't like it. Tectonic Giant, another cool card here. It's a 3/4, and when it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, we get to choose one. It deals 3 damage to each opponent, or we can exile 2 top 2 cards of our library. We can choose one of them, and until the next turn, you may play that card. So pretty much, we get to play that card. Elite Headhunter is another card for cost, 2/3 with menace. Sacrifice another creature we control or artifact. Gets 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. This one's not as good as the other ones, but it's still a decent way to kind of get some damage if you want to redirect it towards target creature or planeswalker to remove it. And then overall, the mana base is pretty straightforward. This one actually is on the lower end because I guess the overall curve is only 4. It's 10 swamps, 9 mountains, 4 blood-filled caves, and 1 Temple of Malice. So the overall total here is 24 lands, and that is the Rakdos starter deck. But guys, if you like this video, let me know down in the comments below what your deck is you're most interested in kind of digging down into playing. I will also leave the links for all these decks in the description, so if you want to import these or just take a look at them, I will also leave a link to the Reddit article if you want to just look at it yourself and kind of just see what was being said. But overall, there's just like saying that there's some of this may be subject to change, so none of these are final lists, but it's definitely a cool way to see what things there are going to be added into MTG Arena. I will be doing another video here about the other half of the decks. I just didn't want to do all of them in one video just because the video would be like 2 hours long. But let me know, guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. If you want to know post more videos, hit that subscribe button. I will catch you in the next video.